Welcome to Allworx phone training provided by WheelHouse Solutions. My name is Marty, and today we will be talking about buttons and layout of the Allworx phone. So, welcome. You should have a training guide in front of you. Hopefully, you have that. We'll be referring to the training guide. We'll also have some information on the screen if you don't have the guide handy. So as I mentioned on a previous video, there are several different models of the Allworx phone. There's a 4 button, there's an 8 button, and a 12 button. And those different buttons refer to the number of programmable buttons or speed dial buttons, if you will, that you can have on the phone. And so the nice thing about it is regardless of which model of the phone you have, all of the rest of the buttons are pretty much the same. And so the features and functionality going from one phone to the other is almost identical, and so you don't have to worry if you're moving from a 4 button to an 8 button. You don't have to worry about not knowing how to use the phone or whatever, because it would definitely be easy to transition from one to the other. So we're going to be focusing on page 3 of the guide. So if you want to turn there, we're going to go ahead and kick this off. So. All right, so again, we mentioned those programmable buttons. So on this phone that you're looking at, this is a 12 button phone. And so there's 6 programmable buttons on the left and 6 on the right. And these buttons can be used for multiple different things. The first use is either 2 or 3 of those buttons. If you look on the right here on this particular phone, 2 or 3 of these buttons are going to be used to handle and keep track of different phone calls. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in another video where we're talking about call handling. But several of the buttons are dedicated for that purpose. The rest of the buttons can be programmed as speed dials or serve other functions that you may have. And so those are things that you can program yourself. So very, very handy feature there. The next thing we'll talk about is at the top of every phone is a visual ring indicator. So when you receive your first phone call or you're on a phone call, you'll notice that that light will turn red. And that's an indicator to anyone who walks up and can happen to see your phone. They can tell that you're on a phone call. Or again, if your phone is ringing and your volume is super low, you'll be able to see it blinking to let you know you're receiving a phone call. Every model of the phone has a full duplex speakerphone. So the audio quality is excellent on that speakerphone. And so it can be used in a small conference area as well as in an office. The first button we'll talk about there at the bottom is the volume control button. And this button on an idle phone, this button is used to change how loud the ringer is on your phone. And so on an idle phone, if you press the plus or minus, you will hear how loud your ringer is, and then you can continue to go up or down to make your ringer louder or not as loud. If you're on a phone call on the handset, that volume rocker is how loud the call is in your handset. And then if you're on speakerphone, the volume rocker will control how loud the call is coming out of that speakerphone. All right. So you can see there's quite a few other buttons here. So these buttons are highlighted. There's section 1 there in your page 3 of your book called the function buttons. And there's 10 physical buttons that do different functions, and they're kind of dedicated to specific functions. So we're not going to go through them in order that they are in the book. We're actually going to kind of go through them in logical order here on what you see on the screen. And so the first button we're going to talk about is the mute button. And you're on a phone call, whether it be on the handset or on a speakerphone, if you press the mute button, it will light up and the caller will not be able to hear you. So you press the button again and turn the light off, then mute is off, and now the caller can hear you. So very easy to use, pretty straightforward. The next button down is the headset button. So if you have a wired headset connected to the phone, or even a wireless version of a headset like a Plantronic or something like that, this button you can use to answer a call or hang up on a call on your headset. The next button down in the bottom left is the speaker function button. So if you wanted to utilize that speakerphone that we talked about when you're on an active call, you just press the speakerphone button, and call that used to be in your handset will now come out of the speakerphone. And there's a microphone there as well so that you could talk without the handset. You could actually hang the handset up into the cradle at that point. If you wanted to go back to the handset, all you'd have to do is lift the handset and the speakerphone button would automatically turn off and you would be talking to the caller back on the handset. So you can kind of toggle back and forth. One thing I will warn you, though, is if you're talking to someone on speakerphone, and the speakerphone button is lit up and you're talking away and you press that speakerphone button, you are hanging up on the caller. So All right, in your book on page 3, we already talked about the volume control there. So let's go to section 3 and talk about what we call soft keys. And so the soft keys are the 3 buttons at the bottom of the phone that correspond to what's on the screen. We're going to talk more about the screen in the next video, but those buttons correspond to whatever is on the screen. And so if you're sitting on an idle phone, it will look, these 3 buttons will have certain features available to you. If you're talking to someone, you will have different features. So that's why these buttons are called soft keys, because they change based on what you're doing. So later on, we'll talk about press this soft key or this soft key, and that's what we're referring to. These buttons that correspond to what's on your screen. And so for right now, you'll see there's 3 options. There's a setting option, there's a calls option, there's a redial option. So if you were sitting on this idle phone and you pressed the center one there for calls, then you would see the call history. And the Allworx stores the last 99 calls, inbound and outbound calls, to whether it be outside calls or someone from the inside calling you from their extension. You can go through and see the call history. And then we'll talk a little bit later about how you can use some other buttons to interact with the screen and scroll up and down and redial someone or things like that. So the button to the right of that, if you're on an idle phone, the button to the right of that is a redial. So it does just what it says. If you press that button, it's going to call back the last person you dialed, whether that be someone on the outside or a 3 or 4 digit extension, 5-digit extension of one of your neighbors. So that's the soft keys. Then to the right of those 3 soft keys is a more soft key or a more button. And what that means is there may be more than just 3 options available to you right now. So the most common of the options on an idle phone will be sitting there all the time, but there might be other options. And so if you press that more button, you will see that there's additional options for those soft keys. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is in the top right is the contacts button. And there's an entire section, entire training video that we'll have for the contacts. But to access contacts, you press this button and your screen will completely change and you'll see all the contacts that you currently have listed on the screen. And out of the box, it will be every other Allworx phone in your phone system or in your company will be listed in the contacts. Those are called Allworx contacts. But you can also store personal contacts like a local pizza place or things like that. You can store personal contacts and no one else can access these contacts. So they will be private. The next thing is off to the right there is the 4-way scroll or the navigation button. You might hear it referred to at times, the 4-way navigation. So that's the up, down, left, and right, and then that center select button or the enter button. And so that's how you interact with the screen. So the screen, we'll talk a lot more about it later, but it is a nice color display, but it is not a touch screen. So if, for instance, you press the calls button on an idle phone, you would use this 4-way to scroll up and down to scroll through your call log, and then maybe hit the center select to select on one to get more information about that call, like the date and time or something like that. And so that's how you utilize this 4-way scroll. So to the right of the keypad, to the right of the number 3 there is your presence button. And so you would use that button to change presences. And so talk a lot more about presences in another video, but let me just say this. Every phone by default is it's in-office presence. And all that means is when you're in in-office presence, someone dials your extension, it's going to ring your phone 4 times and then go to voicemail. And so this button allows you to change your presence in a meeting or away or some other presence that you can select that will have your calls do something else. So that's how we change presence. Below that is the transfer button. So if you're talking to someone and you press this transfer button, that's how you initiate a call transfer. And during another video, we'll be talking more about how you transfer calls. Below that is the hold button. So if you're talking on a call and you press the hold button, it will place that call on hold where you can come back and answer it on this phone. The hold does have a default where after a certain amount of time, it will beep to remind you that you have a call on hold. And it will also, after a certain amount of time, it will time out and send the call to your voicemail. And so we'll talk more about how that works in just a few moments. To the right of those 3 buttons, the top right is your voicemail button. So this will light up when you have new voicemail, and you'll press it to access voicemail. And we're going to have an entire video on how you interact with your voicemail. The next button down is the intercom button. And so with this intercom button, means to describe the intercom, let me describe how the Allworx. If you are on an idle phone and you just dial a neighbor's extension or dial another Allworx extension, that other person you're trying to call, their phone will look at their presence and maybe ring 4 times and go to voicemail or maybe do something else with their call. So that's just basic extension dialing. But if you use this intercom button, it acts a little bit differently in that if you press intercom and dial an extension, it will beep on that phone until the person answers or you hang up. And so it's not an actual ringer, it's more of a beeping sound. And if your phone is like in do not disturb or something like that, then this intercom will not beep on your phone. So you don't have to worry about being annoyed by that. But one other thing that could be an option, like in a kitchen, sometimes we will enable what's called intercom auto answer. And so, because if I intercom to someone's office, it's going to beep until they answer or I hang up. If I intercom into something like a kitchen that maybe we have the intercom auto answer feature turned on, then if you press intercom and dial the kitchen extension, it will beep twice, and then you can talk into the kitchen without having someone having to get up and go answer that phone call. So that's really where the intercom feature comes into play, is when you're trying to reach a phone that might have auto answer turned on. All right, these are all the buttons that we just talked about, and they're also covered there again on page 3. So thank you for joining us, and join us on our next video. We're going to be talking about the screen and more information about how you interact with the screen.